Welcome to Network Spotlight. I am your host, Mikhail. On today's show, I have JD of Rome Blockchain Labs. RBL for short is helping institutions with their investment strategies. They have a terminal, they have an algorithmic trading bot, and they provide key, insightful reports. It's a one stop shop. They take the data from the protocols, put it into one platform that is very user friendly and allow for you to customize the widgets. You'll learn all about it in this interview. And we even talked about the importance of mental health when it comes to Web3 technology. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you will as well. Please support the channel by subscribing, like the video so more people can find out about this amazing talent that we have in Web3. Enjoy. I like your background, by the way. It's pretty cool.
It's real.
Yeah, no, I could tell.
Everybody always thinks that it's like a virtual background, but I have two offices in my house. This one I use for recording just because I've got all the studio lights and proper cameras and shit. And then I've got the office where I spend most of the time, which the background is my window. One of my windows
Mhm.
overlooking the intercoastal. I live in Miami, so it's
Nice.
most people are usually pretty fired up about my background.
Yeah, it's Miami is a good place to be too
Yeah.
in Web3.
Well, and Web3 for weather sake, for being able to travel anywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Every time there's a conference in Miami, I am always down for it. Because
Yeah,
first of all, I'm in Atlanta, so proximity wise, it's pretty close. But
yeah,
any excuse to get away for some warmer weather, I'm down for that.
can't complain. Yeah, it was a good week last week, but now the conferences are getting too crazy. Like instead of it just being Basel, which is crazy enough in and of itself, all of a sudden it was Decentral Web3 Summit, Metaverse Miami, and Basel all in one week. Like it was just chaos.
Yeah. So do you attend these pretty often?
Yeah, I'm kind of the resident mouthpiece for most of the things we're working on, so they send me to represent. I guess I don't know. I kind of
Yeah.
joke that I'm not very smart. My only skill is being able to talk about pretty much anything to anybody. So I guess I go to a lot of these things for that reason. Yeah.
So I guess my next question would be, what is it that you do? But let's just jump right in. I know that you started Rome Blockchain Labs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know you've got some pretty amazing tools that some reputable clients are utilizing. But what really caught my attention about your site was the emphasis on mental health, which is completely different from what you would expect from a technology company. So I'm kind of curious to get that uh, perspective from you. Why is that so important for you?
Yeah, we can go down a deep rabbit hole. I just wanted to make a quick clarification. I'm one of the co-founders of Rome Blockchain Labs. I have two core partners that have been with me since day one. Um, some of the best guys that I've ever worked with, and then we also have four other kind of minority partners that are employee partners. But just worth clarifying, just so that people don't think that I'm the only person behind RBL. But the focus on mental health, I think it's something that we identified fairly early on, that as Web3 scales, there's some unintended second order um, impacts, I guess, of kind of the pseudo anonymous nature, the digital nature, the fact that very little of our interaction in the Web3 world is IRL, and that compounds some of the societal mental health challenges that we have, just the feeling of loneliness and human interaction and meaningful person-to-person care and all of these different things. And so we said, hey, how can we build financial products and technical products and software applications while keeping that in mind? That's a kind of a first principle, really, of when we build things. And it's maybe a little difficult to see, this early on in the evolution of Web3 and of our company. I mean, we're over 2 years old now, but we're still in our infancy relative to most entities. Um, And so it's a little bit difficult to see how that's all kind of come to fruition, our emphasis and focus on mental health. But I think it's something that if we don't, as an industry, focus on, there's the potential to really move towards the feeling of exclusion. And I just don't think that's, we talk a lot about kind of the future of finance, the future of technology, the future of culture, etc., being global and being accessible to all, and all of that stuff is amazing. But there's some byproducts of the way we're going about this that can leave a lot of people feeling like they're on the outside looking in, or that a really strong feeling of, we talk about this. I'm giving you a long-winded answer. I said it was a black
No,
hole,
please.
but you know, we joke about this in the space a lot, FOMO, and getting wrecked, and pseudo anonymity, or anonymity and privacy, and all of these things, and we talk about them, but there's real and persistent mental health impacts of some of those things. Social media in general has been a whole new paradigm for society in terms of mental health, and I think Web3 makes that multiple steps more challenging.
Yeah, you bring up some very interesting perspectives, because I was only looking at it from the lens of, hey, crypto is extremely volatile, right? You
Yeah,
get these like dopamine hits when you see that, you made X amount return on your investment, and then all of a sudden it plummets, right? So
yeah.
to me, that's kind of like the first thing I think about. Okay, some of these dopamine hits that you're getting may not necessarily be so healthy, and you need to, you know, try to maintain some control over it. But I mean, your take on us being kind of excluded and alone in a sense. I mean, that's a very good, interesting perspective as well.
Well, there's a lot of research, none of which I'm prepared to cite here because I didn't come prepared for this question. But there's a growing amount of research on just cognitive dissonance, and how that's impacted with digital trading, digital finance, and so on. And if we kind of zoom out and just take a look at our own experience in the space, right? It's a lot easier to spend crypto or to invest a number on a screen into some, you know, probably vaporware token. It doesn't have the same, even when bank accounts and debit cards really became a thing relative to cash and check, right? There was always that it's a lot easier to spend digital money because you're not counting out the bills. Well, this is even one step further for a lot of people. And so you're absolutely right. I think there's the dopamine, there's the emotional experience, that roller coaster of peak and trough and everything in between. Um, that's also probably baked into our ethos, maybe not as directly as what I explained before. Uh, but I mean, providing data visualization and providing cohesive user experience and very powerful and reliable data, that was, we could again spend hours talking about how we came to this, and I'm sure we'll cover a lot of it. But um, again, we're trying to help with maybe normalize the peaks and troughs, in the sense that giving people the tools that they need to hopefully assess things in a more objective way. So yeah, absolutely.
So let's touch on these tools.
Sure.
How, who are these tools for? Is it for an everyday investor? Is it for builders that are actually building? Can you touch on a little bit?
Yeah. Rome Blockchain Labs, maybe I'll kind of give you like a 10,000-foot view of what Rome Blockchain Labs is, and how we started, and where we are now. Again, might take a while. Hopefully anybody listening has a genuine interest in this, because it might be boring otherwise. But nonetheless, Rome Blockchain Labs started because we were avid participants, in 16, 17, 18, bull market, bear market. And one of the challenges at the time, and something that if you kind of take a step back and look at, to use Wayne Gretzky's analogy, you shoot and pass, or you look to be where the puck is going, not where the puck is. And so if you zoom out a few years ago and you say, okay, could this be a global financial revolution? Which my definition is much different than how a lot of people, on crypto Twitter say revolution. But if we're looking at, being disruptive to the status quo of technology in such a global, well-established space, um, one thing that is invariably going to have to be available is data. And so we said, there's not a lot of data. It's interesting because blockchain is built on transparent and immutable information, and that's really cool. And anybody can access node information, but the reality is, what is the fidelity of the information of that data, and what is the latency of the data? Is it actionable? Can I trust it? And how do I visualize it in a way that is useful? And so, depending on the sophistication of the people listening or watching this video, I mean, almost anybody can spin up a node. It's relatively straightforward, even using cloud infrastructure. But then what? What are the numbers and letters and zeros and ones and contracts and all of this crazy stuff? What does that say? How do we turn that into something that's digestible? Now, we weren't the first ones to imagine this. We were deeply involved in a few other platforms, probably more so than I'd like to admit, but we were deeply involved in the scaling and evolution of a few other fairly well-known platforms. And we said, hey, there's a piece of this that's missing, that if you, again, zoom out and try to guess or at least predict what the environment's going to look like in a few years, there's no one that was building what we thought was going to be needed. And so the first step was to build a cohesive user experience. That's one thing that, for years has been a challenge in crypto. And obviously we're not going to be the sole solution for that. There's a lot of software stack that has to come into, has to be developed and imagined still to reduce the friction and increase the quality of the user experience. But having some cohesive platform, some cohesive place where the functionality appears similar, where there's a certain level of trust built into the platform, that was a big piece for us. The more layer ones that were launched, the more protocols that were launched on different layer ones, bridges and dexes and all of these different structures, it became more and more convoluted and fuzzy and opaque for people. And so our whole thesis was, let's provide the best possible data solution and the best possible visualizations, but let's really focus on the ease of use for people, for individuals, for traders, for participants, people coming into the space, as well as people that are already here. And you asked about target demos. I'll get to that in a second. But as a part of this, development exploratory kind of exercise at the beginning, we realized that, there's a lot of data providers out there, but none of them were built to be able to do something like we wanted it to do. Historical data calls, there's crazy rate limits, crazy compute limits. Either there's a limit and you can't even go beyond it, or it's so prohibitively expensive to use cloud for sophisticated, analyses and databasing and all of this stuff that we said, crap. It doesn't exist, so now we have to build our own data infrastructure. And we identified the best way to do that, in our opinion, for the needs that we had and what we foresee the enterprise needs and the retail needs to be. We built hardware infrastructure globally in data centers. Now, at the time, you probably would have thought we were bloody crazy investing as much capital and time and energy in that. But what it's done now is it's made our data performance really very, very hard to match. And that's really exciting. We don't have compute limits. We do, but it's hardware restricted, not cost restricted or, cloud restricted. And so that's allowed us to offer data solutions that are much more enterprise capable than anything else that exists. So we needed the enterprise capability for our Rome terminal. And as a consequence, we said, oh crap, we've got this incredible data infrastructure that is meaningfully scalable. And it's actually a product, we can productize it. And so that's how RBL Net evolved. So we provide APIs and different data lake kind of infrastructures for enterprises and protocols. And there's a lot of use cases for that, but it's mainly a B2B enterprise play. The users of the Rome terminal, there's kind of three demographics. And there's kind of a sequential approach to acquiring most of those demographics. So there's your current participants of DeFi, of blockchain finance, of blockchain in general. That's probably the smallest pond Those are the people that are already in the space. We understand fairly deeply what they're looking for. Roam Terminal's not quite there yet, but we have some pretty interesting releases coming in the next few days, up to a week, and then immediately in the new year, there's some really cool stuff coming out. So keep an eye on that. But so that's the first target demo. Obviously, is just kind of the people that are already in the space looking for more. There's a B2B component that the revenue model, it's free for users. Users have all the functionality, everything is free, but there's the business model is that there's an inclusion cost and a monthly maintenance fee for the platforms that want to be included. And so the bulk of the inclusion cost is the development. So we take, in conjunction with teams, we take their application and we essentially rebuild the application. It's not an iframe. It's for performance reasons. And again, some of the major limitations we didn't know at the time was in order to have many different networks on one screen at the same time, all providing data in real time. It took some unique approaches to how to build the widgets from a performance perspective. And so we essentially rebuild a front end for the protocols that are included, and then launch that on Roam Terminal. And then we plug into our data infrastructure to pull as much data and analytics as we possibly can. And away we go. And so that's Roam Terminal. We also built something called Velox, which is an algorithmic trading platform. We built this back in the days of Unitrade and Unilayer, if you remember that, before 1inch was a big thing. And we built this because there was a lot of again, I came from TradFi, so I spent a lot of time in fairly sophisticated trading infrastructure. But obviously on-chain, there was pretty much nothing, right? You could go and you could swap on an AMM, but how did you build in any automation? Can you build in algorithmic strings? How do you market make? And so, and there was ways to do it at the time, but they were custodial. You had to deposit your assets into a smart contract, and there's all these risks. So we built a non-custodial solution for that. And it's called Velox. It's amazing. It's more of an enterprise play now. It's a conditional logic string, so you can if then conditional logic. So from an algorithmic perspective, if you're an institution or an enterprise or a market maker, you can build in fairly sophisticated. So you can build in sophisticated strategies. The flip side of that is we also use our data infrastructure for that. So it's very, very, very difficult for any other type of platform like this to beat Velox, which is incredibly important. And you can also use in conjunction with Velox, you can use Roam Terminal. And because the data is so high fidelity, you can run fairly complex regressions on the entire historical data set. Which again is incredibly expensive or difficult to do elsewhere. So that's how Velox came about. We were very early participants in Avalanche. We were in the seed round of Avalanche. We've been big supporters and partners with them from the early days. And we received one of their first grants actually for Roam Terminal and Velox to launch on Avalanche. And they asked us, in the early days of Avalanche, before anybody even knew about it, if we would be willing to build and launch a lending protocol. And we said, okay, I mean, sure we can. I think we've spent a lot of time understanding and analyzing protocols and figuring out how to use them and how to build them and how to make them better. So we agreed and we launched BENQI, which was the first native platform really of any meaningful scale on Avalanche. When we launched, there was very little TVL, and we got up to I think 4 billion in deposits pretty quickly within a month or a month and a half, which is kind of mental in hindsight, but it was a lot of fun. And then Pure Stake asked us if we would do something similar on Moonbeam, and we said, and there's a reason I'm telling you all of this, but we said, yeah, sure, we're happy to do that. We're happy to build the tech and build and train, if needed, a team and get everything lined up to the best of our capacity so that we can replicate kind of the springboarding effect, or at least attempt to replicate the springboard effect that Avalanche had, because we think that we have some unique experience and skills there. But in that case, we put a team that isn't ourselves in front of it. and then passed it off. So it's a bit of an incubation type model where we do the development and build novel technologies and so on, and then launch them into an ecosystem with a team in front of it. And that's something that's actually been, it's worked well. We had some learnings, of course, in the first iteration of that, but we've been approached by many major ecosystems now to do similar things with similar products, some of which we're very publicly behind, and some of which you wouldn't even know that we have anything to do with. But it's been fun. We've been able to, work and collaborate with some incredible teams, and get exposure to many different networks, and it's been exciting. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. I told you it was going to be long-winded, but
I mean, well, the three products that you mentioned are so different, and the fact that you are not only a data provider, but also, you work with Avalanche. I mean, how did you get a team together that has all of this expertise? Because you mentioned you come from a traditional finance background. So how did that all come together?
It's a good question. A little bit of luck, a little bit of serendipity, I think, a little bit of strategy. My two main partners in Rome Blockchain Labs and I, we cover the spectrum. So if you couldn't tell by now, I'm jokingly and truly the mouthpiece of the group. I'm kind of the rah hype guy. I'm always excited about ideas and willing to find creative ways to achieve things. My partner Alex is much more objective than I am. He has a much more well-rounded technical understanding of what can and can't be done. So he's kind of in the middle of the spectrum. And our other partner Hanu is on the polar end. He's technical, and he's one of the smartest guys I know in terms of development. So both in Web 2 development, early infrastructure and architecture, and then now, of course, Web 3. He and I were building bots. I was just there for moral support, but he was building bots well before it was commonplace. And so we had kind of a well-rounded initial team. We tried a few things in the very early days, outsourcing some development, contracting different pieces to individuals and so on. And it was an abysmal failure. So we said the only way to do this is to build the best teams we could possibly build. And so we brought on some people that we know that have done some really incredible stuff in fintech and global infrastructure, global security, some very high quality governmental type stuff, and multinational financial institutions. So like some really well read and well experienced people. And then we tried to do what most platforms do, is bring on kind of the mercenary smart contract devs, a couple $100,000 a year plus, and they all want it, big equity takes and so on. And we realized really quickly that wasn't the path for us either. And so we've actually, our process has been to hire and internally train really, really, really good Web 2 guys. And if you're really, really good and you're familiar and fluent in multiple programming languages, learning Solidity, Rust, Haskell, etc., Move is actually really not that difficult. And what we found is a lot of the development practices and DevOps and different things that exist in Web 2 translate incredibly well to Web 3. And what we noticed is that most Web 3 native developers or engineers just don't possess a lot of that kind of DevOps and the structured testing and structured documentation experience, and just a lot of the things that most teams do to build complex technologies. The processes that are in place just don't exist in Web3 in many cases. And so it's been our experience. A lot of our developers are homegrown. We hire people that are arguably experts in Web 2 in different areas, and then, integrate them with our teams in Web 3. And we have a unique organizational structure at RBL2, which we could probably do a whole discussion on, what we've learned, what works well, what doesn't. But there's something called a teal organization as a philosophy. It's self-organizing teams in a flat organization. And that's how we one of our, I'd say friends, but has now become a partner and works with us full time, worked with some of the biggest tech brands in Europe as their chief operations guy. And he has a lot of experience in self-organizing teams, especially for distributed teams, and it's worked way better than I could have anticipated. And I was the biggest holdout when we said over a year ago, "Hey, let's transition to this." I was like, "I don't know, guys. This is a startup. I don't think we can. I think it needs to be like top down, move fast, break things." But I was proven wrong, and it's been a wonderful experience to see our teams evolve the way that they have.
So it sounds like there's no hierarchy, is what you're essentially saying.
There really isn't. I mean, so there's, and again, we could spend a long time. There's a leadership team, owners and core partners, and we're responsible, obviously, for finances, macro direction, and different things. But at a very very high level, the vast majority of product decisions are done through an advice process. It's kind of hard to explain in a short period of time, but most most of the decisions inside of Realm Blockchain Labs are made by the teams themselves. Hiring, firing, salaries, budgets, product decisions, and it's all based on data, objective analysis, testing hypotheses, and working with users and community to figure out, is this the right path? What I think is the right path is irrelevant. It's what do our users think is the right path, and what type of feedback are we getting? And yeah, it's been pretty interesting to not have to be involved in every decision, to trust that the teams are making decisions that are in the best interest of the organization. Again, I was a huge skeptic. I had zero experience with this, even after being an entrepreneur for my entire adult life. It was foreign, and it's worked amazingly. We had a few people that it just wasn't a good fit for them, and have moved on, but it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty cool.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed, JD, is that you guys are or have worked with DeFi Kingdoms, which is a pretty reputable name in this space. And I don't think that when you land a client like that, I don't think that comes with luck. So the tools that you have, the culture that you instilled in terms of mental health being a priority, and this type of distributed, no hierarchy type of culture that you have, I'm sure all those things play a key role in landing reputable projects like DeFi Kingdoms. How did that whole collaboration come about?
So it's a much longer and probably less exciting story than you're hoping, but we're fairly close with some of the founders of DeFi Kingdoms. Early on, when we launched BENQI, corporate structure was an interesting gray area. Unfortunately, it's even more gray that now than it was then, I think. But we were just starting to realize that there was some fairly complex corporate structure strategies that people were employing, and we had spent a lot of time investigating at the time, almost 2 years ago now, almost, BENQI, and how to structure that from a regulatory perspective to protect our users, our investors, the business itself. Long story short, DeFi Kingdoms, through Luke Youngblood, who we partnered with to run Moonwell when we passed it off, Luke, Lucas, and others, who were friends of ours, advisors of ours. We had worked with them. Luke worked at Coinbase and was an advisor of ours for BENQI. He has a personal relationship with some people on the team a close personal relationship with some people on the team at DeFi Kingdoms. We were introduced. They asked me if I could help them, not as an attorney, I'm not an attorney, explain what we did and where we gathered information from and why we did what we did, just to help them with their decision-making process. And one thing led to another. They were exploring other ecosystems, and we have a good relationship with Avalanche, of course, and so we were able to help participate in bringing them over to Avalanche, and they launched their DeFi Kingdom subnet, and that was really exciting and has been very exciting. We also do liquid staking on Avalanche. Savox was built by us, and as a consequence of that, we run validator nodes for a lot of subnets through our liquid staking infrastructure. And DeFi Kingdoms needed some validators that they could trust and that they knew that it was as good as KYC. We're all quite public, and so we're not hiding behind the veil of anonymity. So there's
You
all
mean
of
to tell me
that.
this is not your avatar? Okay.
Yeah, this is not CGI. This is me. Although my avatar, I look a lot like my avatar, which is hilarious. And that was before I used any of the AI. So, anyways, but yeah, and Dreamer just became a friend, honestly. Who's the president CEO of DeFi Kingdoms? He became a friend. Their philosophy and approach, they've had nothing short of immense challenges with hacks and FUD and all of these crazy things. But watching their team really rally around their core principles, ethics, what they're trying to accomplish, just being immersed in what their team composition is and their communication structures and the level of professionalism, immediately our team was like, whoa, like these guys are going somewhere. We can see why. We're highly aligned in philosophy. So I think it was like a little bit of like, we just were highly aligned and we connected right away. And then we said, hey, like, how can this be a 1 and 1 is 3 type scenario? Like, there's some things you need that obviously we can do. There's some things we need that obviously you can contribute to. How do we make this so it's a meaningful collaboration? And here we are. It's been meaningful on many levels. We're actually launching support. No one knows about this, but we're launching additional support for DFK pretty quick. You can probably put 2 and 2 together. They're launching on Clayton today, so anyways, I'm sure you can put 2 and 2 together how we're going to support. But it's been great working with them. They're one of the best teams I've ever met in terms of just principles and ethics and commitment to doing good, and that was highly aligned with us.
Sounds like a match made in heaven.
Arguably it is.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, so there's been some buzzwords out there, Web3, metaverse, right? All these different marketing terms. Latest one being tokenization. But there's something to this, right? Because recently BlackRock came out and they said, look, the future, everything is going to be tokenized.
Yep.
So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on just tokenization as a whole. What are your thoughts on it? Do we need it? Is it?
Yeah, we're doing a we're doing a video series on this, and I think actually you might be on it coming up pretty quick. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but yeah, we're tokenization. I think is an interesting one. I think it's an area of great opportunity in blockchain, and so I've been fairly vocal about this, and I was an outlier until like a few months ago. But I really think that the next meaningful inflection point for the space as a whole is going to be one involving regulation. And I actually welcome regulation. That's a whole other conversation, I'm sure. And you and the community probably have a million questions. Like, you got into this early enough that you should be all about DeFi and all about decentralization. But I think if, again, talking about what I said before, if you just zoom out for a minute and say, okay, the next meaningful step in order for us to scale beyond where we're early adopters, innovators of the adoption curve. That's kind of where we're at, arguably, to get prosumer, enterprise, institution, and eventually mass adoption. That's not coming until there's meaningful regulation and meaningful goalposts. Period. End of story. There's no way that we're going to have mass global societal adoption of a new technology without the governments making sure that at least they believe they've protected investors and consumers. And so with that in mind, I believe that we are optimizing for the wrong outcome currently. So and we're as guilty of it as anybody else, because we're still playing in the current status quo, right? We're all still playing in this sandbox with what we believe to be the rules. But I think we're spending a lot of time optimizing for like VE mechanics and tri-token structures in gaming protocols and all of these very complex, very convoluted, very novel structures to build value accrual into an instrument, a token. But we're all doing that indirectly and trying to obfuscate that behind complexity to try to look like what a security is built to look like, to function like a security. Like we're doing all of this random shit, not random, but like very complex, novel. There's a lot of risk vectors that are unknown unknowns, And as we see with all of the exploits and stuff, not that anybody is immune to those types of risks if you're building novel technology, but I think we're spending so much time and energy optimizing for the wrong thing. And so, do tokens make sense? Yes. In many cases, they do. I just think that our definition of a token and how it functions is probably wrong. The same way, that's like saying, do stocks make sense? Well, yeah, of course. Like, it's fractional equity-based ownership in an organization. Period. When tokens are all equities or all equity linked, it'll be a very similar environment. BlackRock's looking at it that way, right? Or KKR or whoever else is tokenizing. KKR is doing a big tokenization of their healthcare fund on Avalanche coming up pretty quick, which is cool. I think it's a lot. It's a big fund that they're tokenizing. So there's a lot of advantages. Of course, they think tokenization is the future. It's near instant settlement, global accessibility, 24/7. It's highly transparent, it's immutable, it's composable. Like, there's a lot of exciting things about tokenization relative to stocks, and the ability to build a lot more technical functionality into a token relative to a share is amazing. But I just think that under our current understanding of tokens, I think there's a lot of platforms that have them that shouldn't. I think there's a lot of Web3 platforms that, while leaning into the Web3 kind of label, we believe that we have to adopt all Web3 kind of dependencies, token being one of them, when in reality, I just don't see that being the case. There's a lot of platforms. RBL Terminal is a great example where a token, in my opinion, is not useful. There's no real meaningful way to use a token for a RBL Terminal. We can do it. We can do it to build evangelism, to build a false sense of connection to a project because you have a financial commitment to it, from an investment perspective. But again, we're skirting the lines there. If we're saying that a token exists other than pure utility, we're implying that it's a security, that there's an expectation of positive returns. And so if that's the case, then we should just all be securities. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek. It's not that simple to just all become securities. And I hope there's a transitory phase. There's some middle steps between now and then, so we all have time to adjust and they don't, completely kill the industry domestically. But
well, Michael Saylor just came out and he deemed everything a security besides Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's to his advantage, though. I mean, he's deeply committed to Bitcoin, and I admire it. I mean, to a certain extent, I admire someone's conviction, and he's literally putting his money and everybody else's where his mouth is. Love him or hate him, he's got conviction, and I think that's good. Having said that, you have to take many of the things that many of the pundits say with a grain of salt, because they all have their own motivation, and his motivation is ultimately to have Bitcoin serve as many purposes as possible that crypto offers. And he's of the belief that, Bitcoin is the be all and end all. And so as a consequence of that, if everything else becomes a token, where's the flight to safety in that environment for risk assets, arguably? Where do you go? You either go to stables or you go to Bitcoin if you think ETH and everything else is going to be an unregistered and illegal security. So, yeah.
I mean, there's definitely some red flags with stable coins as well, right? Especially the algorithmic ones. So, I mean, that could be a whole other conversation that we could have for sure.
We could probably spend many hours. I mean, I'm nothing short of opinionated on a lot of this stuff. We spend a lot of time on lobby and policy and, regulation and so on. One of my partners is very deeply involved and much more well-versed at this than I am, but it's definitely an area that we're paying very close attention to.
So how do you think these regulations that we're anticipating will come? How do you feel like they will have an impact on RBL?
Some things I can and some things I can't talk about. We're meaningfully building in that direction. That's about all I can say about that at the moment. More will come out about that in the next couple of months, probably. How will it impact RBL? Well, I think it impacts the space as a whole. I think in a lot of ways, the upside substantially outweighs the challenges that we'll have in the transition, but I think it'll be ugly. To be honest, I think the transition is going to be challenging. If you or anybody you know has ever gone down the regulation and compliance route with anything, let alone financial products, um, it's a whole new, it's a whole other world. Really, it's very bureaucratic. It's there's a lot of politicking that has to happen. There's you got to really and take what I'm saying with the assumption that I don't mean anything nefarious in any way, but it takes a lot of massaging. Like you gotta build meaningful, deep, significant relationships, and there's a lot of trust that has to be established, and there's a lot of nuance to applications. Like it's not simple. It's really not simple. And when you tack on the experiences of late, the FTXs, the BlockFi, Celsius, Three Arrows, Terra Luna, UST. The list is getting obnoxiously long. When you tack all of that recent experience on, I think the scrutiny is going to be high, and so there's going to be some challenges. I think Rome Blockchain Labs, again, we've had I think nobody's impervious to regulatory impacts, whatever that is, but it's something that we've been tracking and watching from the very beginning. And so I think our core products, we've been very careful with our attorneys and counsel to try to build them in such a way that we're definitely inside the boundaries currently. And as things evolve, hopefully they evolve in a step by step way so that we can respond accordingly. But I do think there's kind of only two approaches that you can take right now if you're a regulator, in my opinion. The first one is regulation by enforcement, and over time, due to similar functions to common law in law, you'll end up with regulations just based on precedent. You'll have somewhat of an outline based on decisions or punitive decisions that were made in the past. Sure, it's very slow, it's very sloppy. I think it's not very strategic to do it that way. It's probably the easiest way because then they don't have to have any definitive positions on anything. You can just, as things come up, it's probably the easiest way, and for that reason, it still exists as a high probability outcome. I think the alternative is try to find protocols, platforms, businesses that are already exhibiting what you think you would like to see as kind of a North Star, so to speak. And then use those as kind of example cases and then see as they evolve if there's any refinement that has to happen. That's what I'm hoping happens. I hope that they identify a few different approaches that are probably ideal and then allow them to kind of participate in the regulatory environment, and then based on those results, start to establish meaningful and concrete guidelines. So I hope the latter is the approach they take, but the former is definitely a non-zero probability.
Well, it sounds like you and the rest of the team, you guys are taking this, taking regulations very seriously and being on the lookout for it, which is great to hear. It means you guys obviously are in this for the long haul and are very serious about what you're doing. So I'm happy to
Yeah,
hear
and
that.
I think this is another area that I think the minimum acceptable standard for running a platform in blockchain is undeniably low and maybe embarrassingly low. Even to the extent that you can have some of these fairly large protocols that have never had formal verification, that have never had meaningful audits by third parties, that maybe they had an audit of their initial smart contract release and then they've added a million things without audit since then. Like what does that look like? Where is the line between ignorance and negligence? And you couldn't. There's not too many other spheres of mass public exposure that there's literally no required standards to participate. It's like saying you can go to a doctor and not know if the doctor completed medical school and is board certified. Like it's just some guy that put on a lab coat and maybe he's good, maybe he understands all the medications that are out there, but like it's not a real doctor. And it's maybe not the best anecdote to use, but you know what I mean? Like it's the same thing. You've got people that have no business running business, that are building and scaling some incredible platforms, incredibly large platforms in blockchain. And then we act surprised when things come crashing down. Well, I mean,
It's still the Wild West, right? So
yeah. And so I think, what we're most focused on, and the reason that we're so supportive of, some sort of regulatory clarity, I think, is at the very least, it should set a minimal acceptable standard that at the very least we can all count on, right? Like, okay, if you're going to participate with this type of protocol in blockchain, we know that at the very least they should have had to show some audits to someone. They should have some sort of economic risk management strategy in place, whether that's a third party agent-based simulation firm, third party risk modeling firm, Gauntlet, Chaos Labs, and others. There should be some sort of ongoing security management. Like, how are you monitoring the security of the protocol? How do you know if something's going wrong, and how long does it take, and what are your response strategies? And how does your team respond if it's 3 a.m. in North America when hopefully we're all sleeping, or at least this part of the team is sleeping? What are the contingencies? Like, what happens? How do we wake people up? Like, we all have bat phones. We have a whole bunch of strategies that are in place, fragmented keys everywhere, multi-sigs. Like, we use some pretty complex operational technology. And I think, again, short of putting a lot of those protections in place, I think it's pure negligence. Like, I think being able, like, just saying, oh, we didn't understand or know the risks, to me is ridiculous. Like, we now know the risks. These exploits, the economic exploits or manipulations, I guess, have happened many times. The smart contract exploits have happened many times. Very large values of capital are being lost or misdirected. And that to me says that no one should be launching platforms without some level of meaningful commitment to consumer protection. And the only way to guarantee that is through laws, right? Same thing with like speeding and why you can't kill people. Like a normal person knows that you can't murder someone. Like, I don't need a law to tell me that I can't go and murder someone. But it's not the normal person that those laws are in place for. Those laws are in place to protect against the outliers. It's no different in crypto. I think a lot of us are saying, well, we don't need regulation. Forget the government. Keep them out of it. Yeah. 90% of us probably are doing a lot of this stuff already. But it's that other 10% that, and in crypto especially, that other 10% that's doing things maybe outside the status quo of rules, can build in a very false sense of profit, right? Like, we're seeing these exorbitant yields and guaranteed 20% UST on Anchor. Like, come on. Like, yeah, of course, it's going to scale really quickly. But I mean, to an unbiased observer, where the hell are they getting 20% yield from? Is that sustainable? How do you maintain that? Like, anyways, I think we all just need to be a little bit more objective about this and be willing to be a little bit more critical of platforms and teams that are launching, and whether they're really equipped to run a business, and whether that business deserves my trust or our trust as participants.
yeah, the regulation would definitely set a divide between those that are very serious, that take this very seriously, and the ones that don't. Um, JD, great insight. Thanks so much for all the knowledge. I'm gonna have you back on because I feel like this conversation can go on longer, and I can ask you more questions. But where can people follow along on your journey? Because you've got some products that are on the way. Where can people learn more?
Yeah, best place. You can search for the Rome Blockchain Labs Twitter. Obviously, we're fairly active on Twitter. You can check us out there. We have Rome Terminal and Velox both have Telegram channels. You can search simply Rome Terminal and Velox, Velox. Send me an email. Go to our website, romeblockchain.com. Check it out. Give us a follow. We do stuff on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. I don't know, everywhere. We're
Be
everywhere.
sure to include the links.
Yeah, absolutely. Just include the links, and you can feel free to include my Telegram username at the Diamond Rock. And anybody can send me a note there too if they want to reach out.
Perfect. Any parting thoughts?
Uh, no, I mean, the only major parting thought I think that I have for people is don't be discouraged. It's been a painful, 8, 9 months. But if it's any silver lining, I spend a lot of time interfacing with and talking to other builders, other founders, ecosystems. There's a lot of incredible work, incredible teams, amazing technologies that are being built. As with any bear market, the night is always darkest before the dawn, and it's pretty damn dark at the moment. So it's tough sometimes to see um, or have an expectation of a positive future, but it's there. The technology isn't going anywhere. Yes, we have a lot of bumps ahead of us, but there's a lot of people here for the right reasons, and that's for me. There's nothing more motivating than all the amazing intellectual minds that are here trying to change the world, and that's exciting. Let's leave it there.
Amazing. Thanks so much, JD. Appreciate the time.
My pleasure, man. Happy to come back anytime. Excited to have you on our call, and maybe I'll shut up and let you talk a bit, which is
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
all right, brother. We'll talk soon.